Good afternoon. Happy Saturday. Jimmy here in Chicago. Hope everybody's doing well. Today's story is about total betrayal. It could be your best friend, somebody you grew up with as kids, somebody you've known your entire life. It could be a wife testifying against her husband. It could be a son testifying against his father, a brother testifying against his brother. I mean, imagine your best friend setting you up, luring you to a place knowing you're going to get murdered. So that's what we're going to talk about. That's what this life is about. Not only going to jail, but betraying your family members and friends, having them killed, testifying against them, wearing a wire, setting them up and trapping them, knowing that your testimony is going to send them to life, send them to prison for years. Not only destroying that person's life, but their families. That's what these informants, rats, snitches, whatever you want to call them, that's one thing they don't really consider, they underestimate. Not only are they bringing down their best friend or their loved one or their sibling, but they're bringing down several other families, destroying many, many lives. So that's something to think about. But before we get into tonight's story, as always, if you guys like my Chicago mob trial stories, hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. I appreciate all your comments. The vast majority of my stories are about the trials that I went to. My stories aren't about movies or documentaries I've seen or books that I've read. This is an insight from what it's like being inside that courtroom. This past week, I was very fortunate to exhibit at the world's largest packaging show at the Pack Expo in Chicago. You can tell by my voice. I've lost my voice, but it is really something to see what goes on at this place. As we know, McCormick Place has a history of corruption. Back in the day, if you exhibited at the McCormick Place, there was a good chance when you finally got your crates delivered back to your company, sometimes there were items missing. Also, if you did time in jail, did your time like a man, came home, knew people, you automatically got a job making union scale at McCormick Place. You can imagine the $1 million sweetheart contracts that go on at the McCormick Place. No one knows DeFranzo, Rudy Fratto got pinched on that forklift deal. A lot of Chicago outfit guys, friends, associates, family members have worked here for years. Back then, even today. But they're making an honest wage. But years ago, we had a bad reputation because exhibitors from all over the country, all over the world, got fed up with the politics and outrageous pricing and stealing and corruption that was going on. So we lost a lot of the trade show business to places like Orlando, Vegas. This is where people would go there with their families. But now the shows are back in Chicago. It's nowhere near corrupt like it used to be. Several Chicago outfit guys used to work here. God bless them. A few of them I won't mention even got injured and then end up filing a workman's comp claim. So imagine doing 10, 15 years in prison. You get out. Now you're working at the McCormick Place and then you sue. You get injured and you sue. What a racket though, man. But what I like when I watch these guys, and by the way, nobody's slacking. These guys are all working their asses off. But when it comes break time, immediately they stop whatever they do and come right down and go on break. And the production comes to a screeching halt. And that's pretty funny to see. But again, just to show you the power the Chicago outfit had, providing all these legitimate businesses and guys to make a good living. Chicago Mercantile Exchange as well. Now here I broke down a little chart, right? Now I'm not 100% on the percentages, but here in the blue, I would say mostly city jobs, right? Pretty much every Chicago outfit guy, associate, family member back in the day all had city jobs, whether it was the water department, streets and sanitation, if you want to be a cop, you want to be a Cook County sheriff, you want to work in the mayor's office, all kinds of city jobs were available, as well as state jobs. Some of these men who did the time, who put in 30, 40 years are now retired and enjoying a nice 401 retirement plan they have with the city. And most of these guys don't bust their ass, believe me. The hardest part of the job is just showing up. But once you're there, once you put in your 8, 10, 12 hours, if you're doing overtime, you're really not doing much. But the hard part is just getting there every single day for the next 30 years. But ask any Chicago outfit guy, their family and friends, the vast majority of them work for the city. Back then and even still today. The orange piece of the pie, I would have to say, is the Chicago Board of Trade and the Chicago Mercantile Exchange back in the day. It might be a smaller slice than that, but those guys definitely made the most money. A stockbroker is the highest paid profession. They make more money than a doctor, more money than a lawyer, more money than a professional athlete. My first week on the trading floor in the S&P 500 in the 90s, I saw all kinds of Chicago outfit guys. I recognized their last name. Some of their fathers were in prison, and their sons, nephews, relatives, associates were all well taken care of. In the gray area, I'm going to go with the McCormick place, right, or McPier. It's controlled by the unions. There's so many guys that are released out of jail that want to work, that are connected, and they get a job working at McCormick Place, as well as all the what I'd like to get a hold of is some of the sweetheart contracts that go on, just to provide materials or certain services. I mean, those are $1 million contracts that are handed out. But it was interesting when I was at the McCormick show. You know, I walked around, I talked to some guys. Actually ran into some guys from Taylor Street. I ran into some guys from the neighborhood I grew up in. So there's also, I even ran into some guys that do the valet parking. All good guys, but it was interesting to see some of the homies, some of the brothers that work at the McCormick Place that complain that they're not making the scale that the union guys are. And I wasn't going to really argue with him, but what the homie doesn't understand is these guys, the union guys, have talent. They've got skill. These are skilled trades. That's why they're making more money. Most of the brothers and homies working at the McCormick Place are just sitting there, just standing around. I really don't know what they do. Maybe security or just doing some paperwork. But it's kind of funny to see that they they're not happy that they see all these union guys making big money while they're making peanuts. But what they don't realize is these are high-paid, skilled jobs. And then last there, the final one I would say is the hired truck program, where Mayor Daley and the Irish Gang and some of the Chicago outfit guys like Rocky LaMantia and many others were doing trucking services for the city of Chicago. They eventually all got pinched and indicted. But here's my little chart, right? You got city jobs, including state jobs as well. You've got the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, Chicago Board of Trade. You've got the McCormick Place, Navy Pier, McPier, and then you've got the hired truck. Okay, that's enough about that. Now we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about this legendary mobster, Sam Momo Giancana, right? This guy led with violence. He was out there in the press, in the media, kind of like a John Gotti. He did the exact opposite of what Tony Accardo and Paul Ricca told him, to keep his head down. Eventually, we all know what happened to him. He came back from Mexico. He was cooking one of my favorite dishes, Italian peppers and sausage. He had a friend, somebody he trusted, to come over. And at this time in Giancana's life, he didn't trust anybody. This happened in Oak Park. You could drive past his house. It's still standing today. He led his trusted friend in, and when he turned his back to attend to the peppers and sausage, he was shot several times in the head, one time in the mouth. The gun used in the Sam Giancana murder was made by Ronnie Jarrett and Frank Calabrese in Ronnie Jarrett's mother-in-law's garage right there on Low Street. That was kind of like their stash houses. Some people think it was JB himself. Some people think it was Tony Accardo himself that killed Sam Giancana. A lot of people also think it was his best friend, his bodyguard, his chauffeur, his most trusted soldier, Butchie Bellazzi. One of over 1,000 unsolved murders by the Chicago outfit. But whether it was Butchie, Tony Accardo, Spilotro was somebody that Sam Giancana trusted that killed him. Now, speaking of betrayal, you've got Junior. On the right, there's Frankie Breeze, Frank Sr. on the left. Junior testified against his own father. He actually wore a wire while they were locked up together, conning his father, tricking his father. He got his father to talk about murders his father should have never have talked about. But this is a son that got fed up with the verbal and physical abuse by Frankie and put together a plan similar to the Menendez brothers, right? Put together a plan to steal all his father's money. Frank Calabrese was the biggest loan shark in Chicago. He made millions of dollars in cash. So Junior's plan all along was to steal his father's money and have him locked up for life because he knew he was coming home that one time. And that's exactly what happened. And to ensure that, he pitted his uncle Nick against his father Frank, and he actually wore a wire on him. Junior's so lucky, Frank Calabrese never would have found that wire. But it was Junior's letter that tipped off the FBI and started the whole investigation. If it wasn't for Junior's letter, there would have never been a family secrets trial. But what Junior didn't realize, or no, he probably did know, but didn't care. He wasn't just bringing down his father. He destroyed many other men and their families. I don't know how this guy lives with himself, but that's the betrayal of a son betraying his own father. Now here was the Lincoln there's the Spilotro's car, the Lincoln that they found. I think they found in a hotel parking lot near O'Hare. That was the day that Tony Spilotro and Michael Spilotro went missing. According to the evidence and testimony witnesses at the family secret trial, it was little Jimmy Marcello that set up Michael Spilotro and Tony Spilotro. That was planned. Jimmy Marcello was friends with Mikey Spilotro and the Spilotro family. That was probably one of the few guys the Spilotro brothers trusted was little Jimmy. So according to the government, according to Calabrese, it was little Jimmy Marcello who set up the Spilotro brothers. If you ask me, I think Jimmy Marcello acted more as an Uber driver. Spilotro brothers were killed 1986. Tony Splotcher was only 48 years old. I thought he was older. Michael Splotcher was 41. Now here's John Feckerata, Big John Feckerata. He was clipped after the botched burial of the Splotcher brothers. He lost a sit-down with Frank Calabrese. But Feckerata continued to break rules during his criminal career with the outfit, and they eventually had him killed. But they knew Feckerata, a savvy old maid member, dinosaur of the outfit, didn't trust anybody, wouldn't get in the car with anybody, but he did trust his best friend, Nick Calabrese. So it was Nicky Calabrese that killed his best friend, John Feckerata. I did a story on that if you want to check it out. He tricked Feckerata into a ruse that they were going to blow up a dentist's office. When they were in the parking lot, Nick bent down to pick up some flares, which appeared to be like fake dynamite. Instead, he pulled out a gun. Feckerata said, "Oh, no, not you." Feckerata caught the play. They struggled with the gun. The gun actually went off, shooting Nick through the arm. He didn't even realize it. Feckerata ran as he's running for his life. Right before he got to the bingo hall on Belmont, Nick Calabrese, his best friend, caught up to him, shot and killed him in the head. Afterwards, he accidentally dropped the bloody glove. The cops put the bloody glove into evidence, and many years later, they tested the bloody glove, and it had Nick Calabrese DNA on that glove. And that's one of the reasons Nick Calabrese testified. But I bring this up because John Feckerata, he would have never have ratted. He would have never have rolled. He would have went to prison. But because of all his mistakes, he got killed. I think maybe Feckerata didn't give a fuck anymore. But he was only 58 years old. But it was his best friend, Nick Calabrese, that killed him. Now here you got El Taco, right? Boss of the Chicago Heights crew. He was one of the men that took part in the burial crew. And if I remember correctly, he was also one of the guys that killed Tony and Michael Spilotro. I think he was at the house. I'm not sure, though. But he was definitely part of the botched burial crew. And it was his own wife. His own wife got sick and tired of the verbal and physical abuse. And she testified in court that she received a call. He was yelling, he was swearing, he was out of breath. He demanded that she pick him up in Northwest Indiana. So here's this woman. She leaves suburb of Chicago. She drives all the way to Northwest Indiana. It's dark out. I don't know how she found him, right, without GPS and cell phones. But she testified in court that when she picked him up, he was in work clothes. She claimed she never seen him in work clothes. He was all dirty. He was out of breath. And he was yelling and screaming, bitching about how the guys he was with, he lost them. And he admitted, confessed to what he did, taking part in the burial. But it was his own wife that testified against him. She went into great detail, proving that he was there, that he was one of the men that botched the burial. Luckily for Taco, he never got killed. I have a friend in the neighborhood that told me he used to go to one of Taco's brothels back in the day. But this guy was somewhat of a legend in the Chicago outfit. He landed to Greece, and they eventually caught him, and he ended up dying in prison. But it was his own wife that testified against him. Now here, talk about betrayal. You got this coward, Nicky Calabrese. I call him a coward because he admitted on the stand that he was a coward. That's what he referred to himself as. Just like Junior, he didn't He was scared of his brother. Thought maybe his brother would end up killing him one day. His brother wasn't really paying him for a lot of work that he did. He didn't like the way his brother was treating his two sons, his nephews. So there was a lot of hatred and resentment between the two brothers. But bottom line, when Nicky Calabrese got caught by leaving a bloody glove with his DNA on it, linking him to the Feckerata murders, he decided to flip and cooperate, especially when they threatened him with the electric chair. So he testified against his own brother in court. You will never see anything like this in your life, seeing Nick Calabrese calmly sitting 15 feet away from a very angry Frank Calabrese, who testified against him. I thought for sure Frankie Calabrese was going to jump over the table and attack Nick. He easily could have. But for the most part, Frank Calabrese controlled himself. But Nick Calabrese not only betrayed and destroyed his brother's life, he destroyed several other families as well by his cooperation. For example, when he was locked up with little Jimmy, he was complaining that he was doing all this work, heavy work, for Frankie Calabrese, and he wasn't really getting paid. He's just getting paid peanuts. And when Nick Calabrese was away, nobody in the Chinatown crew or any other crew, including his brother, helped him or his wife or his family. Jimmy Marcello said that when they get out, because they had a date. Jimmy Marcello had a date. Nicky Calabrese had a date. Frank Calabrese had a date. These guys were coming home. Nicky Calabrese testified that Jimmy Marcello told him, as soon as we get out, you can come work for my crew. That's what Nicky Calabrese should have done. So he offered him a position, right? He offered him a job. He also, through his brother Mikey Marcello, he had Mikey start dropping off $5,000 a month to Nick Calabrese's wife. He took care of Nick Calabrese's family. That shows you what a wonderful man Jimmy Marcello is. But yet, what does Nick Calabrese do? He places him at the scene where the Splachos were killed. He claims it was Jimmy Marcello that picked up him, Feckerata, and Jimmy LaPetria and dropped them off at the house. Again, he acted as an Uber driver. But at first, Nick Calabrese lied and said that John Feckerata picked up him and little Jimmy LaPetria at Venture parking lot. But then after he slept on it, he told the feds what they wanted to hear, that it was little Jimmy. I don't know how this man can live with himself. But he betrayed his good friend Jimmy Marcello, who took care of him and his family when he was locked up. And he also betrayed his brother. Now here's a betrayal. Connie's Pizza, right? One of the biggest pizzerias in Chicago. The owner testified in court that one day a couple wise guys, couple thugs came to see him, threatened him with violence if he didn't come up with several thousands of dollars. I forget the amount. The owner went to his good friend, who he knew from the neighborhood, who he went on vacation with, who they hung out with in Florida, Lake Geneva, Mexico, was Frank Calabrese. He went to Frank Calabrese. He told him the problem. Frank Calabrese said, you got to pay an X amount of money. The owner of Connie's Pizza gladly paid the money, hoping his problem would go away. But the whole time, Frank Calabrese, his best friend, the guy he was on vacation, the guy he would vacation with and party with, hang out with, was the one that was behind the extortion. That was one of the biggest scams going. They would send in a couple guys to scare the fuck out of somebody, That guy would not go to the cops, wouldn't even think of going to the FBI, go to one of the bosses in charge, ask him for a favor. They would make him sweat it out for a little while. Then they would say, okay, you have to pay this amount. The whole time, he was behind a whole scam. But Frank Calabrese scammed his best friend, the owner of Connie's Pizza. There's Frankie the Breeze there. This guy died on his favorite holiday, Christmas. His own son and his own brother testified against him. Now, this piece of shit here is one of the worst. I don't like the man. I took heat from some people that watch my show, but I've seen him. I can only go by my impression of him. But BJ Jehoda ratted out all of his good friends. He was very tight with Rocky and Felice and Rocky's crew. Rather than do a couple years in prison and pay a big fine, he decides to wear a wire, flip, and cooperate on all his friends. But what really makes me sick about this guy, he lured one of his friends, a bookie, Robert Plummer, that the outfit guys were having issues with. He lured the man to his death. They gave him the business, killed him. He eventually became trunk music. But BJ Jehoda testified that he'll never forget the gurgling sound that this man made when he was dying. BJ Jehoda said that he had nightmares about that. I don't have the photo. When I went to the Bobby Salerno trial, because Bobby Salerno, they hung on the first, he was hung jury in the first trial. They tried him again. BJ Jehoda testified that he lured his best friend, his BFF, Hal Smith, to a bar restaurant near Long Grove, Illinois. He wanted to get him drunk. They were drinking, and then afterwards, he invited him back to his house for more drinks. And here's where Hal Smith should have caught the play, right? He knew he was on bad terms with these guys. He had words with Sally D at a restaurant, disrespecting them. He was refusing to pay an additional $6,000 a week or a month, whatever it was. Keep in mind, this greedy bastard was making on some nights $400,000 a night. Let me say that again, $400K a night in gambling, the largest bookie in the country. If it wasn't for his greed, if he would have just paid these guys the additional $6,000, he would have been alive today. Then he went ahead and disrespecting them, talking shit about the Italians. So BJ Jehoda, blowjob Jehoda, a guy I seen in court, testified that he lured his good buddy Robert Plummer to his death, and also Hal Smith. When he took him back to the house, BJ said, hey, let me go check the mail. Go on in. The kitchen sliding glass door is wide open. Hal Smith must have been drunk, or maybe not the brightest guy in the world. He walks into the kitchen door, and according to BJ, Rocky was there, a couple other guys. They all had gloves on. They gave him the business, and they gave him a little extra because of some of the shit he talked. They tortured him a little and then killed him right there on the kitchen floor. BJ Jehoda said that Bobby Salerno, the man in the black, was one of the men standing over a very dead Hal Smith, but there was no way BJ Jehoda could see from the mailbox that the man in black, Bobby Salerno, was there. That was a lie that BJ Jehoda told. But unfortunately, his testimony convicted and destroyed not only Rocky and Felice, Sally De Laurentiis, Louis Marina, Bobby Bellavia, but several other families. So this guy could have done probably 3 years in prison, paid probably close to $1 million in restitution. Instead, he destroys probably 40, 50 lives. Now here's Chicago outfit associate Ronnie Jarrett. There's his house there in Low. As we all know, he had some issues with the current boss of the 26th Street crew, Johnny Apes. Maybe there's a little bit of money involved. And he was on his way to a friend's funeral. He got killed right across the street from his house. I believe his son, Ronnie Jarrett Jr., just came home from house arrest. And he testified in court on what happened that horrible day. Allegedly, two masked gunmen pull up in a moving van. Guy gets out dressed in a Chicago Bears jacket. Allegedly, Anthony Calabrese, the other Calabrese, and shotgun blasts him, killing him. An agent just happened to be a couple blocks away by chance. It was the first one on this scene. But I bring up Ronnie Jarrett because, now again, Ronnie Jarrett is a guy that is either going to get killed or at most likely end up in jail. He spent quite a bit of time in jail. He could have easily flipped on anybody in the 26th Street crew or the Taylor Street crew or any of the other outfit guys he knew. But Ronnie Jarrett is just one of those guys that's in his DNA. They're never going to rat. They're never going to roll. Stand-up guy. God bless him and his son and the entire family. But I'm bringing up Ronnie Jarrett because he was good friends, not best friends, but good friends with John Mendel. This is the piece of shit here that planned the jewelry store heist. And then the Jew reached out to Ricardo, who he was friends with, told him about the heist. There was several very precious gems that were missing. Ricardo demanded that the thieves return all the jewelry. John Mendel and his crew returned that jewelry. But Mendel was pissed, along with Stevie Garcia. They figured they put a lot of time and effort into this score, and they wanted something out of it. So they came up with the brainstorm idea to break into Tony Ricardo's house in River Forest, one of the most powerful, richest, most dangerous men in the country, if not the world, right? JB himself. So they break into his house to rob the jewelry. Ricardo, we all know, gets the call while he's in Palm Springs. Make a long story short, Ricardo, Iupa, Ferriola, Carlisi, they round up all the known burglars in Chicago, and one by one, each with a different nationality, started brutally torturing and killing each one. Ronnie Jarrett reached out to John Mendel in talk and promise of a big score. Mendel fell for it. When he met with Ronnie Jarrett, he was jumped. You had, I think Goomba was there, 350-pound outfit guy. You had Frank Calabrese, Nick Calabrese, Ronnie Jarrett. They jumped him. Frank Calabrese strangled him with a rope. And then Frankie Calabrese handed his brother Nick Calabrese the knife, and Nick Calabrese slit this man's throat from ear to ear without any hesitation. But the only reason I'm bringing this up, good friends. He knew he was in deep shit. There weren't too many people he trusted. He trusted his good friend Ronnie Jarrett. Why? Because they did time together. Why? Because they did a lot of scores together. But again, it's your friend, somebody you trust, somebody you've known for years, your family member, right? Your girlfriend. They're the ones that set you up to be killed. They're the ones that use you as a get-out-of-jail-free card. We'll keep going, guys. I hope I'm not boring you, man. We've got James Hoffa, right? Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa, man, this guy was a Marine, World War II veteran, good friends with Hoffa, Irv Weiner, Joe Lombardo. I mean, the list goes on and on. One day, Alan Dorfman and Irv Weiner met at the Purple Hotel up north. I think Irv Weiner had a check for Dorfman. Two masked gunmen walk up to him, allegedly Frankie Schweiss, maybe Spilotro, or the little guy, no, I'm not sure, another unsolved murder of the outfit, and they killed Alan Dorfman. You can see there's the crime scene photo. His body's right there between the two cars, his big puddle of blood. But not one shot was fired at Irv Weiner. I bring this up because Irv Weiner, a very trusted friend and business partner of Alan Dorfman, Irv Weiner set him up. Now here's one we're going to go back to the 80s. This is a friend of mine, John Kappas, good Greek guy from southwest suburbs, and his girlfriend, a girl I know very well, Julie Craig. You could just tell it's in the 80s. But John Kappas was one of the biggest drug dealers on the southwest side back in the day. He was making right around $10,000 a week. But rather than keep a low profile, kind of flaunting it, I mean, everybody knew him and all his friends, his crew's business. Thank God I never got involved in these guys, but this is a good man here, and she was actually a playmate. She posed for, I think, playmate or hustler, a total babe, good people, old friends of mine. I haven't seen them in years, but I bring this up because Julie Craig testified against her boyfriend, John Kappas. Obviously, she was scared. She didn't want to go to jail. Not saying she was part of the crew. I don't think she was, but if she would have just stood tall, she definitely should have kept her mouth shut. But what I didn't like about this, not only did she testify against her boyfriend, but she showed up in Chanel, Louis Vuitton, Prada, all blinged out. This guy spent hundreds of thousands, over $100,000 in jewelry alone. And then only for her to flip against him. Also, I'd rather not mention his name. An old friend of mine, he's out. He's home now. Hopefully he's behaving himself. But he was John Kappas's best friend. He got pulled over for a small amount of cocaine. Rather than take that pinch, spend a little time in jail, he got scared. And that's how the whole Kappas crew got pinched. But it was John Kappas's best friend and his girlfriend, Julie Craig, that ratted him out. Now, here's another friend of mine, Paulie C. I'm not going to say this guy, Mr. Brown, George Brown, was his best friend, but that's definitely a friend, somebody he helped when George Brown was down, guy he helped when he needed money. This guy would maybe do some collections, for Paulie back then. Got a little violent, but they got Paulie on tape talking shit about a beating that they gave a guy. But again, it's one thing to get pinched, but to actually wear a wire on one of your friends, I can't think of anything worse. I strongly believe that if it weren't for some of the government's key witnesses, the government would not have enough to go to trial. I really believe that. This is usually the strongest piece of evidence that the government has is wiretaps and informants that tell a lot of the inside details that the government would never know about. But here's, I think his name is George Brown. He's passed away now, but he actually ratted out his good friend, Paulie C. Paulie C did his time like a man, never ratted, never rolled. This man did I think close to 15 years in jail. He did 3 years in the MCC. And I asked him, Paulie, how did you survive that? He said, Jimmy, man, this is part of the life, right? It's part of the life. But here's a friend betraying another friend. Now we're going to go back. We're going to talk about Philly real quick, right? We're going to talk about boss of the Philadelphia crew. You got legendary Angelo Bruno. This is an actually crime scene photo. This guy was associated with Joe Iuppa and Tony Arcardo. Now, Angelo Bruno was the quiet dom, almost like a Carlo Gambino or a JB, old school, low key, non-flashy. And look what happens to him. It was his consigliere. Consigliere is a very trusted position in the La Cosa Nostra, right? You got your underboss, you got your consigliere, then you got your captains, your maid men and associates. So the consigliere is your most trusted advisor. And sure enough, Antonio Capogingo, not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right. Antonio Caponino. He set up the boss to be killed. 2 masked gunmen walked up to him when he was sitting in the car and blasted him. This sent terror throughout the entire La Cosa Nostra. This was a major, almost like when Paul Castellano got killed, because you're not supposed to kill a boss. And look, that just shows you how notorious and brazen these guys in Philly were. But this Angelo Bruno, this happened, I think, 1980. He was 69 years old. And again, it was his counselor, his right-hand man, that set him up. This sparked a major war in Philly for 4 years. Over 200 people got killed. That's one thing about Chicago Outfit. Chicago Outfit, we had the chop shop wars, but there weren't major wars like the Philly, Boston, or New York crime families. These guys were killing each other, almost like what street gangs did. Now here you got John Gotti, right? Boss of the Gambino crew, coming out of the Ravenite Social Club. You could actually go there and right there in Little Italy on Mulberry Street. Right next to him, you got Sammy the Rat, Sammy the Bull, his underboss, and then you got Frankie Loke. We all know what happened. Sammy Gravano, being the rat that he is, did not want to take a pinch. He decided to flip and rat against John Gotti and the entire Gambino organization. Sammy Gravano participated in 19 murders, and the only way to beat a rap like that was to flip against one of the most powerful bosses in the country, and that's exactly what happened. But here's Gravano's underboss that decides to flip against him. And shortly after that, now here you got Gravano with his family. This man whacked out his own brother-in-law. That's right, Nicky Scabetta. He kills his wife's brother. Sammy Gravano also whacked out. So here's this guy, Sammy Gravano, right? Rats against the boss of the Gambinos, John Gotti, and several other New York heavyweights. He kills his best friend, Eddie Garfola, and kills his best friend, Nicky Scabetta. Now Sammy the Bull is alive and well, doing podcasts, writing books. You guys see a problem with that? There's no way in hell the government, our jury system, should allow a man that has killed 19 people like Gravano or 14 people like Nick Calabrese and give them a pass, to give them a get out of jail free card, just to lock up one man. This man has destroyed, I don't even know, probably close to 200 families. He even killed a 16-year-old boy, Kaiser, that he doesn't talk about. But here's Sammy Gravano, kills his best friend, kills his brother-in-law, and rats out his boss, John Gotti. Now here's Paul Castellano, right? Boss of the bosses, boss of the Gambino crew. This happened December, right around 5:30, right there in Midtown. You can imagine the traffic. It's Christmas, New York City, right side out of Sparks Steakhouse. Tommy Bellotti, the driver, pulls up right there in front of the restaurant. This restaurant is still standing today. I highly recommend checking out Sparks Steakhouse next time you're in Chicago, because it's going to be closing soon. December 1985, the hit team dressed up as men with these funny hats with these trench coats, kind of like a Russian Europeans type hat, right there, December 1985, in the middle of rush hour. Soon as the car pulls up, Paul Castellano gets out and he's ambushed by 3-4 gunmen, and then another gunman shot and killed Tommy Bellotti. According to Sam Gravano and John Gotti being the driver, slowly drove by and actually witnessed the murder of Big Paul Castellano and Tommy Bellotti. Tommy Bellotti was only 45 years old at the time, and I'm trying to forget. I think Paul Castellano was like 60. So they were fairly young men or mid-aged men. But this was probably the biggest hit, one of the biggest hits in organized crime. Right there, you can see the Lincoln. And then shortly after that, I forgot to mention, it was Frankie DeCicco. Frankie DeCicco is the one that set up Paul Castellano and Tommy Bellotti. He's the one that set up the meeting. They were going to have a meeting. Obviously, Tommy Bellotti, Paul Castellano trusted Frankie DeCicco. He was a high-ranking member of their crew. Basically, he was the underboss, would have been the boss one day. So it was Frankie DeCicco that set them up. And then, of course, in retaliation, Frankie DeCicco, he gets killed outside a club in New York City. There's the remains of the car blast. Frankie DeCicco was only 52 years old at the time. I think that Chin, the boss of the Genovese family, was behind this. This was payback for the Paul Castellano, Tommy Bellotti hit. That was an unsanctioned hit. And Gotti, Frankie DeCicco, Sammy Gravano should have known better that they cannot take out a boss. Very similar to what they did to Angelo Bruno. And I think Tony Arcardo and Iupa were shocked, to say the least, when they killed Big Paul Castellano. Now here you go. You got boss of the Bonanno family, Big Fat Joe Messina, right? This guy was a boss. We all know the Bonanno family actually got shelved by the commission because Donnie Brasco, FBI agent, was able to penetrate that crew. So they were shelved. They were literally thrown off the commission. And then fast forward, just because of all the money involved, Joe Messina, Big Fat Joe, was very close to John Gotti. He became boss. This fat ass made millions of dollars in the rackets and made even more money legitimately. Kind of like a John Nono's DeFranzo. But this piece of shit here blows trial. Him and his co-defendants are found not guilty. And then he decides to cooperate. Now, how is that fair? How is this man able to blow trial, lose, keep all his money, stay out of jail, and flip? He flipped on his right-hand man, a trusted, loyal soldier, Vinny Gorgeous. This man is still in jail now, doing football numbers. They got him on tape. This fat pig actually wore a wire in jail talking about murders. I think he's probably 70 years old right now. Hopefully, they will give this guy passionate release. But that's an boss of the Bonanno crew testifying against his underboss, his right-hand man, just so he could save his family and all his money. This man here died in 2003, and hopefully he made amends with the big man upstairs. Now here you got John Francis, right? Michael Francis' brother. Crackhead, cocaine, drug addict, I don't know what you want to call him. This man actually flipped and testified against his own father. That's right, he pulled a Frank Calabrese Jr. But Sonny Francis one of the toughest mobsters in the history of organized crime, lived to be 103. He did the time standing on his head. Never ratted, never rolled. Took care of his son Michael and their family. But his son, John Francis, was given $50,000 from the FBI, paid living expenses, in and out of rehab, in and out of jail. And he ends up testifying against his own father. Wonder sometimes if Frank Calabrese would have killed Junior. Wonder if Sonny Francis would have killed his own son. We'll keep going. Now here, just recently, right, you got Lil Durk from Chicago. In retaliation of his homeboy, who was killed, King Von. King Von was killed in Atlanta. King Von, as we all know, lived that life. Lil Durk allegedly sent 5 of his homies out to LA. He paid for their airfare, their hotel expenses, to kill the little gangbangers that killed King Von, and they ended up accidentally killing his cousin instead. But they charged Lil Durk with conspiracy and orchestrating that murder. He's in prison right now. He's in Miami. They're probably going to ship him out to the West Coast. But this is a Chicago kid. Hopefully, through his lawyers, he could somehow, some way get out of this. But the reason I bring up Lil Durk is his best friend from O Block, his right-hand man, is this piece of shit here. This guy wore a wire on Lil Durk for years. Now, this guy did some time for the crew years ago. He comes home. Lil Durk buys him a house, gives him $50,000, some spending money, and hooks him up in the studio. Lil Durk, like King Von, took care of his homie. And what does this piece of shit do? He's wearing a wire on Lil Durk the entire time. You know, it's one thing to, if you get pinched, there's one thing called dry snitching. But to actually wear a wire on somebody, knowing that that conversation is being recorded, is going to send your friend, your family member to prison the rest of your life. I mean, that's the worst of the worst. But here we will wrap it up. Again, the vast majority of these federal, probably in state trials, if it wasn't for the government's snitches, informants, they would not have enough for a conviction. They need to change these laws, you know, to give a guy like Nick Calabrese only a few years in prison for 14 murders, or to give a guy like Sammy the Bull only a few years for 19 murders. I think it's time to look into some of these cases and send some of these people home. If you guys like my Chicago mob trial stories, please hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. If you guys want to read some of the Nick Calabrese transcripts, I have them. I'll give those to you for free. I have Lenny Patrick's testimony. That's pretty interesting. One of the worst men you'll ever read from. He testified against Gus Alex. I've got some photos, all kinds of photos. I also got a couple shirts, right? Do a little merch. Al Capone, Ralphie Capone. I got my guy Joe Lombardo. Last Supper. Nice photos. I got my guy Carlisi, Wings. Alderman Fred Rohde. And his logo, vote for me and nobody gets hurt. I also got the Wild Bunch crew. You guys ever want to do a tour in the neighborhood? Check out the Grand Avenue neighborhood, Taylor Street, Bridgeport. Let me know. Hope everybody's doing well. So we will recap real quick. I always like to do a recap. Again, my chart on legitimate jobs, legitimate careers. And most of these are pretty good jobs. City jobs, right? Cop, fireman, streets and sanitation, Department of Water, mayor's office. You got the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, Chicago Board of Trade, gray area, we'll call that the McCormick Place, and you got the Hire Truck Program. These legitimate jobs here, back in the day, A lot of your Chicago outfit guys, family and friends, associates worked here. Some of them still do, making a really good living because it's not all about robbing people, gambling, the rackets. A lot of these guys, most of them, the smart ones, have legitimate jobs. Some of them become top criminal attorneys as well. But this is my little chart. We all know Sam Giancana, obviously, was a very trusted friend of his. He let in that door, and that trusted ally, whether it was Butchie or Tony Ricardo, kills him right there in his home. Ultimate betrayal. Junior testifying against his father. Kind of reminds me of the Menendez brothers, right? The Menendez brothers lived with a rich father who was hard on him, who probably yelled at him and busted their balls. And the Menendez brothers, but once they found out their dad was going to cut them out of the will, they put together a plan to kill their parents, their mom and dad, and that's exactly what they did. During the brutal shotgun killing of their parents, they actually reloaded. Now that they've been in prison 35 years, now they're claiming they were sexually abused by their father. Just like Junior. I'm sure her father was rough on him verbally and physically, maybe smacked him a few times. So what does Junior do? He puts together a plan with his uncle to steal all his money, like the Menendez brothers did, and also have his father locked up. I remember my good friend Mike from La Luch used to say the Calabrese was like the Menendez brothers. But here's total betrayal. Junior testifying against his own father. The Spilatros, this was the car, a Lincoln that they found after the brothers disappeared. We all know they were lured to a house in Bensenville where they were brutally beaten and stomped to death. They could easily shot the Spilatro brothers or stabbed them up or choked them out. But what did they do? They brutally beat them with fists and feet, giving them major footwork. I think that was done deliberately. That's how pissed off the heavyweights were at Tony Spilatro. You got John Feccarata. He was betrayed by his best friend, Nick Calabrese. Nick Calabrese was the one that killed Feccarata. Poor El Taco. It was his wife that testified against him, claiming she picked him up after the botched burial of the Spilatro brothers. Nick Calabrese, he ratted out everybody, not just the Frank Calabrese, not just Joe Lombardo, not just his brother, but he gave the government a who's who of the Chicago outfit. He talked about past crimes, and there was nobody did more damage to the Chicago outfit than this coward here, Nicky Calabrese. Connie's Pizza, as I mentioned, was extorted by Frank Calabrese, and Frank Calabrese best friend owned Connie's Pizza. He went to Frank Calabrese for help, but he had no idea that Frank Calabrese was behind the extortion. BJ Jehoda, he ratted out the entire Rocky and Felice crew. He lured his good friend Robert Plummer to death. He also lured his good friend Hal Smith to death. These were two of the biggest bookies in Chicago that decided they weren't going to pay the outfit no more, and they both ended up trunk music. But BJ Jehoda lured both of these men to death. Ronnie Jarrett was good friends with John Mendel. John Mendel trusted him, promised a potential score. They met at a warehouse, or near a warehouse, near Ronnie Jarrett's mother-in-law's garage house, where he was brutally jumped, strangled, and Nick Calabrese slit his throat. Irv Weiner, good friend and business partner with Alan Dorfman, set him up. John Kappas had his own girlfriend, probably his fiancée at the time, and his best friend testify against him. Paulie C. helped this man here, get him a job, helped him with money. And what does he do? He rats out his good friend. Angelo Bruno, boss of Philly, was set up by his underboss. Gotti and Frankie Locke were set up by Sammy Gravano, their underboss. Sammy Gravano kills his wife's brother, his brother-in-law, also kills his best friend. Paul Castellano, Tommy Bellotti were killed outside Sparks Steakhouse, set up by Frankie DeCicco, their underboss. And then the Chin, in revenge, kills Frankie DeCicco. This piece of shit here, Big Joe Messino, boss of the Bonanno family, blows trial, then decides to flip and cooperate and actually wears a wire on his underboss, Vinny Gorgeous. Vinny Gorgeous could have ratted out a million guys still in prison today. They don't make men like this anymore. And look how good he's doing his time. Look how good this guy looks. He looks better than most guys who are out on the street. Hopefully they'll release him one day. And then here you got Francis, right? This guy testifies against his own father, Sonny. Sonny lived to be 103. And then, of course, little Dirk, his childhood friend, a homie he helped with when he got out of jail, bought him a house, gave him all kinds of money, hooked him up in the record studio business, and then he wears a wire. All right, guys. It's been an hour. If you like my Chicago mob trial stories, hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. Everybody have a great weekend. My next show coming up, I'm going to talk about where some of the Chicago outfit wise guys and associates, what college they went to. When these men were convicted and sent away, we're going to talk about some of the prisons and jails that they spent time in. Have a great weekend, guy. Ciao.